Let's talk about perfectionism. I did a video in this series previously and we talked about trends. And overwhelmingly, when I asked for ideas for this series, a lot of people talked about perfectionism and how it relates to social media and what we're consuming on a daily basis, but also where it comes from. So I did a deep dive looking into this topic because this is something that I think a lot of us, I would venture to say all of us in some capacity, suffer from. I feel like suffer seems like a strong word, but I think for some people it really is kind of suffering, whether you realize it or not. So we're going to get into all of that. I'm going to be getting ready as well. I honestly hadn't planned to do my makeup while doing this, but I needed to do my makeup and I was sitting down to do it before filming and I was like, why don't I just do them at the same time? So that's what we're gonna do today. So first of all, let's talk about what perfectionism is. I know a lot of us know what it means, but from maybe a more scientific viewpoint. So perfectionism is traditionally defined as a tendency to set high performance standards and striving for flawlessness. That word flawlessness really stood out to me because that's exactly it. It is very much black and white, all or nothing, and we'll get into that too. It's commonly understood as a personality disposition developed in childhood and consolidated in adolescence as part of a more general identity formation. But it also talks about how the two kind of different versions of it, so there's self-oriented perfectionism, which they're calling SOP, and then socially prescribed perfectionism. So the big difference there being that the self-oriented one is one that's more of an inner turmoil. They describe it as an inner pressure for perfection, but then the socially prescribed one is more subjective, and that pressure is coming from family, friends, or from social environment. And I'm going to throw in social media into that as well. So I would assume that people can kind of have both. Like, I definitely feel like my version of it stems from childhood, but undoubtedly has been kind of confirmed and worsened with social environments, especially social media. So I have not started getting ready. Let me start to get ready. So first of all, let's talk about where this all comes from. One thing I have been talking a lot about in actually recent videos is some of our core beliefs from when we were younger. And I posed a question to you guys, and I'll pose this question in this video too. How would you finish this sentence? I am loved as long as I blank. Or I am accepted and valued as long as I blank. For me, the things I like instantly filled in was like thinking of me as a child, for example, going back to there. How would you have answered that? Well, I am loved and accepted if I get good grades. I am successful. And I feel like because I got good grades, it almost became this machine that I wasn't really even driving, but it was driving me. And I was like, well, I've gotten good grades, so I have to continue to get good grades, because if I didn't, then all of this adulation that has been put on me for getting good grades, all coming from a good place. I'm not saying it was necessarily a bad thing, but because of that, I thought, oh, well, then I want to continue to feel that. And as long as I keep getting good grades and being successful, then I will continue to get the adulation. And that is where my value and my worth comes from. So I think it can kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way when you're a kid. And again, not always because of something that is being done to you in a negative way. Do you know what I mean? As a parent, having higher expectations for your kids is not always a bad thing. I mean, obviously it can be depending on the scenario. But as I continued to think through my core beliefs of like, why, what is it that makes me feel like I have to do to be loved and accepted? I also started to think about the social piece. And I was like, well, I'm loved and accepted as long as I don't ruffle any feathers, upset people, and it started to dive into that social piece. But when I boiled it down, what I realized was basically all of those things point to, as long as I am perfect and flawless, I will be accepted and loved. Do I know when I'm saying it out loud that that's not true? Of course. But these kinds of things can be so deeply seated in your psyche and in your mind that it's hard to separate sometimes, and you don't even realize why you're doing things a certain way or why you're thinking certain things, when really there's something that's just so deeply rooted in you. It's hard to just shake even when you know that it's not necessarily true. I have to say, it is hard to get ready while also doing this. I don't know what I was thinking. So one thing that has been connected to perfectionism is social anxiety. And for me, I would think of social anxiety as having that pressure in your mind and fear of being in a social situation where you are not performing perfectly. And for me, I used to think, yeah, social anxiety, I'm just nervous around other people. But when you really dig deeper as to, well, then why am I nervous around what am I scared will happen? What I'm scared will happen is an awkward lull in a conversation, or someone thinking I'm not as perfect as I present, or I'm not as smart as I present, or I'm not a good conversationalist, or I'm not, insert whatever you want. That is, for me personally, what my social anxiety is rooted in. And even just knowing that now has helped me so much. I don't feel like I could do a whole episode of this on social anxiety, but the way it connects to perfectionism, I wanted to read this to you. So it says, people with social anxiety have been found to have very high expectations when it comes to their performance in social situations. They become highly self-critical when they don't reach these expectations. These primary features of social anxiety are also the key components of perfectionism. So there really is, time and time again, a lot of researchers have found this link between those two. So it says, researchers found that people with social anxiety have many of the same thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that people with perfectionism have. So I want to highlight these unrealistic beliefs that both a perfectionist and someone with social anxiety most likely believe. I must be perfect so that others will value and accept me. My value and worth depends on my achievements. My value and worth depends on what others think of me. Being anxious and fearful means I am weak and defective. In order to like and accept myself, I must be perfect. If I'm criticized about something, it means that everything about me is wrong or bad. Now, obviously, this is not all black and white. There's a gray area. It's kind of on a continuum of where you may fall with these. But I think all of us feel some of this, some version of this, some worse than others. But I want to keep that term performative in mind, and performance, because I think at the root of so much of our perfectionist tendencies, it is a performance. You're wanting things to be perfect for a reason. You're wanting people to notice it so that you, again, feel loved and accepted by other people. And so you're performing for other people when you in your mind know that may not be your normal day. One example I think about a lot with my own perfectionism issue is if I know people are coming over to our house, I really used to be bad about making sure every part of the house was spotless. Candles lit, all surfaces wiped, everything vacuumed, baseboards wiped down, nothing out of place. Even with kids, I would make sure all of the toys were put away. Like it was the most bizarre, like specific thing that I needed it to look a certain way. And again, digging down deeper, like the root of that is what? That they would discover that I am not as perfect as maybe I think I present. Like it is the most bizarre thing when you really take a step back. But this all leads to my next point, which is we have this deep need to be accepted. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a part of human nature, 100% survival, like thousands of years ago. Survival. You needed to be loved and accepted by your pack, by your tribe, for even just safety reasons. You know what I mean? But it, of course, makes me think about adolescence. So we've talked a bit about childhood, but really thinking about adolescence when you're in that awful, awkward age gap, I would say between, I don't know what the actual definition, but generally like 10 and 11 through 15 or 16, maybe even plus or minus nowadays. When I think back on my own adolescence, I think about how all of it was centered around being accepted, 100%. And, you know, even down to, well, what brand of shoes are you wearing today? Is the adolescent, do they have the Stanley Cup that everyone's talking about? Because if not, someone at school is going to make fun of them that they have the off brand and it's cheaper. And so therefore, you know what I mean? Like all of these dumb little things, and it's gotten so much more pervasive nowadays, but all of these dumb little things that we would all do, these hoops you would jump through, you know, begging your mom. Like I remember begging my parents when I was younger for a Furby, the real deal name brand Furby when those were really popular. Or when I got older, begging them for UGG boots, which I never got, by the way, which good on them because I do love UGG boots and I have some. But as a kid, like that's an expensive purchase that A, my parents could not afford, but B, I didn't need. I didn't need. The whole purpose of it was, yes, I maybe needed boots, I don't know, but the whole purpose of wanting the name brand 100% was to be socially accepted and thought of as cool. And there is a consistent link between perfectionism and anxiety. So when you're learning in adolescence, well, I don't want to mess up. I want to fit in, and I have this deep need to fit in, which is just part of our nature. It is really obvious how perfectionism tendencies would just continue to snowball if you already had that tendency as a kid. And I think this is where, like, when they talked about the two different definitions, the socially prescribed perfectionism and the self-oriented, I think a lot of time in childhood, you've got maybe that self-oriented one, but then as you get a little bit older, the socially prescribed one, that piece can kind of take hold. And that's what I'm saying. I feel like you could definitely have both. So that brings us to today. Social media's influence on perfectionism. To be honest, when I first was sitting down to kind of script this video out, and I'm obviously not getting ready, I should have just accepted it. So when I was sitting down to script this out, I kind of struggled with like thinking about how has social media affected perfectionism beyond the obvious. So I feel like, when many of us were younger, the social setting was simply school or maybe your neighborhood or a club or church. And so we had these pressures, but it wasn't like it is today. And that's nothing new for any of us to hear. But the new social setting, the new third place is the internet. And knowing that when you were in school, you may see, the mundane day-to-day of like your friends and what their lives are like and what our lives are like. But with social media, you're never seeing an influencer's low points. They're mundane, day-to-day, boring tasks. You're only seeing, of course, as we've all heard, a highlight reel. And we know that. Again, this is one of those things that we all know and we're reminded of. But deep inside us, as we're presented with more and more images of perfectly curated homes and decorated homes and someone that their skin always literally looks amazing, even though they're like aging, but somehow they're aging backwards. And you're like, how is this possible? Why is their skin flawless? We are no longer presented with a healthy ratio of things, people being dressed up and perfect and the normal day-to-day bumps in the road, hard times in your day, etc. It's absolutely like the scales have completely tipped. And now 95% of the time, we're just seeing the perfected, curated collections of things that people are posting online, myself included. So it's not necessarily to fault people that are posting things like this. I am in this world, but I think you really have to look at your own consumption. We'll talk about that in a minute. I think at the root of it, we're only sharing, and I'm speaking for myself here, what I deem would be acceptable by the masses. And so within that, for me, I feel like I have definitely leaned into my perfectionist tendencies being on the internet. It has made it so much worse. And so trying to deconstruct that when I am showing my face to the internet all of the time has been really, really difficult. Really difficult. I had a moment the other day where I was about to film. It was within a vlog of mine. I do vlogs on my channel. I do make it videos too. And then now videos like this. But I had a moment the other day where I was about to pick up the camera to vlog, and it was just like a normal day. I had some makeup on. I was like, okay. And I thought, oh, I'd better put lipstick or lip gloss on. And I stopped myself and I was like, why? Because in your normal life, if I'm vlogging and trying to be more realistic, I would not have, I might have put on like lip balm. I throw Aquaphor. I use Aquaphor constantly. But just being around my house and picking up the camera to just chat while folding laundry, I thought I'd better put on a lip product. And my only reasoning was because I knew that I wanted to look acceptable. And if I had makeup on and maybe nothing on my lips, or if I looked disheveled, it might not be accepted by other people. I might be lifting the veil of being perfect. I know I don't present as perfect anyway, but you know what I'm saying. I feel like no one's immune to that. I guess, I don't know. Like I've been doing this for so long and I know what it's like behind the camera. And I still am not immune to the pressures of like, well, I better look perfectly presentable. It wasn't until a few years ago that I finally grew more comfortable with leaving the house without makeup on. Think about that. Like that's so incredibly sad that I felt that my own face, I'm a Christian, my God-given face, I felt that I would not be accepted at a gas station or a grocery store or the library without wearing makeup. That is so incredibly sad. It's so sad. Now I'm getting emotional. It's sad. And, I have 2 young girls, and I cannot help but think how much this is going to invade their lives. You know what I mean? I try to be so conscious of how I talk to them about my own body and my face and aging, and because that affects them. It becomes their inner voice, what they hear their parents saying, especially to and about themselves, is something that they will internalize. So just being aware of that, like if you are a parent, really being aware of that. Getting off topic here, kind of. But back to the putting on lipstick. I know I'm like dwelling on this, but I think one thing is I will always feel like I am a fraud and that oh boy, we drew eyeliner all over the place. And again, that's a discussion for another video, feeling like a fraud. But in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, well, I'm not good enough. Therefore, I'd better present as though I am. I'd better, I talk about makeup on my channel, so I'd better have makeup on, or else, it's going to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. Oh man, is that the last of it? Oh, Jessie girl. Speaking of perfectionism, I can't fix my eyeliner and I don't have anything to remove it. This dried out, my little makeup remover bed, and I don't have any makeup remover here. I don't even have a wipe. Oh my gosh. All right, we are fixed-ish. So for me, all of this perfectionism is 100% made so much worse with social media. And I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that point. Because now these young girls who already have perfect skin and all that stuff are looking at these influencers that maybe have perfect makeup and all this stuff. And I understand the irony of doing my makeup while we're talking about perfectionism and social media, but okay, just bear with me. So I wanted to read this. It said that they were doing some research on whether perfectionism and social media play a prominent role in the well-being of adolescent girls. The findings highlight that those with higher levels of self-critical perfectionism are considered to be more vulnerable to negative social comparisons, as their self-worth is linked to the idea of being perceived as perfect and flawless. This is heavy stuff. That's heavy stuff for a little kid or adolescent that's still figuring out all the other hard things that come with adolescence. We've layered on this heavy, heavy layer of social media, and now they're thinking their self-worth, again, is tied to looking perfect and never aging and having all the trendy clothes and having a perfectly decorated home or a Stanley water bottle. I know I'm dwelling on it. I have a Stanley myself, but you know what I'm saying? That's the perfect example with where we're at right now as a culture. If you have not seen the videos of little 9, 10, 11-year-olds screaming, crying when they open a Stanley water cup or whatever at Christmas time, it made me so emotional to see video after video of that, because while it was sweet that they were so excited about a water cup, it really made me sad, because what they were excited about was the idea of finally feeling accepted by their peers, because they finally have that one random name brand thing that's gone viral. And how sad, how silly it all is. How silly it all is. And, I'm talking about little kids, but we do it as adults too. And, I've talked about makeup and skincare and aging and all that, but it's not just looks. Let me give you the example of the Pinterest pantry, okay? I was talking about this in a recent vlog too, a realization I've had. So a little before the pandemic, and then during the pandemic especially, I took on the task of organizing our pantry. Our pantry is kind of like a closet that's just this wide, and it's got just some shelves. It's plenty of space for what we need. It's probably good that it's not one of those giant ones, because then I would end up, filling it with stuff we really don't need. I went through and I'd, pinned on Pinterest and on Instagram, I'd saved a bunch of things that were pictures of these curated closets that everything, all the pretzels were decanted into a clear bin. Everything was decanted. Decanted, is that the right word? But everything was dumped into these nice clear bins, organized, labeled. So I was like, I can do that. I'm at home with nothing to do during the pandemic. So I did that. I organized my pantry. It still didn't look Pinterest perfect, but I felt like I had completed one more step in my road to being just like what I saw on the internet, right? Just perfect. And what I realized over the course of the next few years, fast forwarding to today, is that a lot of things don't make any sense to dump into containers. And then we'd eventually, like our croutons, for example, we would have in the bag and we stopped even dumping it in. We just put the bag in the container and put the lid on. What are we doing? But in my head, well, no, but this is what you're supposed to do. And Tyler, my husband would be like, why are we even doing this? It doesn't seem to make sense. And I'm like, no, it's what you're supposed to do. Like this is, and looking at it now, I'm like, okay, well, that was obviously kind of silly. It looked kind of okay, but it wasn't really reasonable. And my point in bringing this up is this is something you see and you aspire to on social media, those kinds of things. When in reality, what you're not seeing is, they don't know, people that have closets like that, pantries, they don't know when the expiration date is for a lot of that stuff. Or if you're refilling your tortilla chips that are in a thing, the old ones on the bottom, well, what do you do? So I'm like, do I just dump that in and then pour the new ones and then put the old ones on top? Like, there are so many things that don't work because of that system. But when you're seeing these beautiful images and videos online and on social media, you're not seeing those day-to-day issues you may have with this beautifully curated pantry. Also instructions, that was another thing I realized, like with oatmeal. We would pour our oatmeal into this glass thing and we ended up we're like, well, we need the instructions for this oatmeal because it's not straightforward. So then we're cutting out the instructions and taping it on the back. And I'm like, what are we doing? I say all that. I've still got a lot of my containers in the pantry and I'm kind of weeding out which ones work and which ones don't. But I guess my point there is what you see that may seem perfect online oftentimes simply isn't. It may look a certain way, but it's not in real life. Same with if you're following someone that they've always got filters on their face, well, in real life, they don't look like that. But especially for adolescents that are watching this stuff, they may know that, but when they're only seeing these filtered images, they think they're supposed to look like that. So they look at their perfect skin and they're like, oh, but I can see that I have like freckles or redness here, or this, that, and the other, and mine shouldn't look like that. It should just look smooth. So I need to wear makeup even though I'm only 9. You know what I mean? Not shaming the 9-year-olds that wear makeup, but like also that just makes me sad. They're still kids. Like, go play outside. Get dirty knees. Like, go play Monopoly. So one of the biggest pieces of perfectionism that I've struggled with is the idea of all or nothing. And what I mean by that is if I feel like I can't do something perfectly the first time, it's not worth doing. I'm just not even going to try. Or if I had a plan for something, my best example is working out. In February, this month, I set a goal to work out every day. I've already missed a day or two. And so in my perfectionist brain, I think, well, then forget it. I'm just not even going to try. But there's still so many more days in February at the time I'm filming this. So like giving up because I didn't meet my goal perfectly is exactly the issue with perfectionism. It's crazy. It's such black and white thinking and it's really hard to shake because even when like yesterday, I was like, all right, I know I missed a day or two here or there. I'm going to get back to it today. Even doing that workout, I'm like, but who cares? Because I've already, and it's just such a silly way of thinking. It's almost childish in that way, but it's, like I said, it's really hard to shake. And I just feel like these kind of lies we tell ourselves are really hard to undo, to like untangle in our brains. And since so much of it might have come from your childhood or from when you were younger, it's even harder to undo. And I don't know, like, can you even perfectly, oh gosh, this bronzer. Can you even perfectly, like get perfectly, see, there I go. How can I be really good at getting over perfectionism? Like, how can I do it perfectly? So what can we do, right? Like, how do we move past this? We know all this. We know that social media is this highlight reel. We've known it for a long time. What do we do to help us get over this? This is something I'm still grappling with, but I wrote down a few things that have been on my mind that I think may help you, they may not. I want to know your comments below. What do you think would be helpful? Like what is the fix for this beyond like, okay, maybe therapy, etc. But you know what I'm saying? What are some action steps we could actually take to help us? So the biggest one, be aware of how you are feeling when you are scrolling social media. Is there a certain app or person that you follow that always makes you feel that certain way, that you feel like I'm not good enough? I'll never be as good or perfect or organized or whatever as that person. You're in charge of your social media experience. Period. No one is forcing you to follow these certain people. So the power of unfollowing someone or an account or deleting an app that is just making you feel crappy, that power is incredible. And the reality is, if it was TikTok that's making you feel that way, I don't scroll on TikTok anymore. I have an account. I upload my shorts that I make for like Instagram Reels as well on there. I don't scroll on there. I just don't, because I can't. It would, A, it's just a big time suck, but B, then I'd be fed certain ads that'd be like fitness people or things that just really, for lack of a better word, kind of triggered me in a way and made me feel less than. And by not being on there and being fed that, it has been so much better. Instagram's my next project because I love Instagram, but I waste a lot of time on there, and there are definitely accounts on there I need to unfollow that give me that feeling. At the end of the day, our time is precious, and we spend a scary amount of time on our phone and on social media. And when that's permeating our mind, it's permeating our lives. And so we've got this idea in our head. So then, you might be sitting at home on a Saturday looking around at where you live and thinking, well, this is nothing like what I see on the internet. Like, I am just unsuccessful in life. Like, look at me. I have low self-worth because I feel like I'm nowhere near what I'm seeing constantly online. It's not healthy for us. It's not healthy. So my second piece of advice is to find accounts, if you do want to keep going with social media, which I assume most of you would, myself included. Find accounts that are maybe more realistic or at least more similar to your own life. I don't think there's anything wrong with aspiring to be more or better or whatever. It's when it crosses over into self-deprecation, where you're in your head tearing your own self down, or you get that feeling. So I don't think, my point is not to be like, oh, you better unsubscribe from all these big accounts, because I think there are plenty of big accounts that have beautiful lives that can be really interesting to watch. But you know what I mean when you get that feeling. But I think finding people that you click with in one way or another can be really helpful, because then you're being fed that stuff that maybe either makes you feel better about your life or it just makes you feel more validated. Like for me, especially with young kids, I follow accounts that are talking about their kids, and they're more, not necessarily ones showing their kids, but like they'll talk about their experience with their kids, and it makes me feel validated in how I'm feeling. And I think that is where social media can really be beneficial, right? Kind of finding a tribe and community of people that build each other up, or at least help you feel like you're not alone in whatever it is you're going through. I've tried to give myself grace. Do you feel like every photo you see of yourself, you're like, hate it, look terrible, right? Not only have I avoided saying that in front of my little girls, but I've tried to avoid saying that, period. Because a lot of times the photos that I'm like, I don't want to post that, or I don't want to print that and put it in a frame or favorite it on my phone because I look a certain way that I don't like, whatever it is. But a lot of times those are the photos where I'm like with my kids and just giggling and laughing, but I'm like, but I can see my double chin. You know what I mean? Or they end up being photos like, it's going to make me emotional again, but Tyler, the other day, there's this photo of me that I feel like I look hideous in. And the other day we were printing some big photos for we were printing some photos for our like big gallery wall, and we were picking which ones. And there was one, and like I said, I didn't like the way I looked at it. And Tyler said, I didn't say that, but I was like, maybe not that one. And we're kind of looking. He said, oh my gosh, but that's one of my favorite photos of you. And I just looked at it and I'm like, why? But that's just it. Like, we can't see our own essence and the way that other people view us. And with perfectionism, you're trying to artificially create how people see you. And you focus so much on what people think of you, how they see you, how they perceive you, when in reality, we're not in control of how they look at us. We may go into a social situation and think we were perfect, and other people walk away thinking like, geez, I don't like that person, whatever. I just think we try to control so much. And at the end of the day, like, it's not gaining us much when it comes to that kind of thing. So speaking of social anxiety, like that piece of perfectionism, one thing that's helped me a lot in the past few years, because I do think I've come a long way with this, is asking yourself, okay, what is the worst case scenario? I'm nervous about going to this dinner party or whatever it is. What am I worried about? Like, what would happen that would just send me reeling? And I'm like, I mean, the thing I'm always scared of is like there being a lull in the conversation or it being awkward or me not knowing what to say. But the odds are that in that situation, one, most people don't even notice. But B, I'm always thinking that like all eyes are on me and everyone's thinking about me. And the reality is no one is. Everyone is at that darn dinner party thinking the same thing. They're all worried about themselves. And so it's wild how much importance we place on ourselves when you have this perfectionist tendency. Very self-important, right? That I'm thinking everyone's noticing what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what I'm not saying. If it's awkward, when they're not, they're worried about their own things. For me, like, while I may beat myself up about thinking like, oh gosh, that conversation was so awkward, like I did not know what to say, blah, blah, blah. I'm terrible at talking to people. That other person that was a part of the conversation is probably thinking the exact same thing about themselves. Like, gosh, I couldn't fill that lull. That was super awkward. Or they're not, because they're not insane like me. Last night, I had some girlfriends over and we were doing a book club. And the book we were talking about was Lessons in Chemistry. We just had a moment where we were all talking about, and I know we're talking about perfectionism, but we were all talking about aging and our bodies and all of that kind of stuff. And it was a very poignant moment for me because I think as women, we are from a young age, like I talked about, so much emphasis is placed on the way we look. So much emphasis. And when you also have this perfectionist thing going on in your mind, you're thinking, well, then I'm not supposed to age and I'm not supposed to look my age. How dare I look my age as I get older? And again, I always say, and I remind myself of this too, two things. I did not expect to get emotional in this video. Sorry, y'all. One, how lucky are we to get older? Like, think about how many people you know in your life that died way too young. Like, how selfish of us to, about getting older. So the second piece, now I'm a Christian, so this obviously would apply to you if you also are, but the other thing I say to myself all of the time, I had to look up what it was because I didn't have it memorized, but it's Psalm 139, verse 13 and 14, really 13. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I don't know why that verse has just always stuck with me. Like that terminology, you knit me together, because I just feel like for me, we're made perfectly. We're made perfectly. And if we're already perfect, anything we're trying to do with our own human minds, hands, etc., is pointless. And I know that's easier said than done, but that is just one thing, that quote, that has really helped me through a lot of these kinds of mental games I've played with myself. Okay. I did not expect to get this emotional in this video. I would apologize, but I'm not sorry. I'm obviously going through all of this too. And that's why I was saying this topic is very important to me, because I do think it affects more of us than maybe you even realize. I'm curious your thoughts. What are your thoughts on perfectionism and social media? We all know, how social media is affecting us, but how do you feel like it's affected you when it comes to your perfectionist tendencies, if you have them? Or do you feel like you maybe weren't like that, and now with social media, you've become more of a perfectionist? And do you have any tips or tricks or favorite quotes or Bible verses or whatever it is that you feel like might help someone? Please put that in a comment. And if you read one down there you like, give it a thumbs up so it'll kind of make its way up. I feel like this could just be a really nice comment section on this video. Again, if you wanted to see my video about trends, I will link that below. It was a little more lighthearted, okay? It was not, but this series I've been calling my Getting Real series, and I'm excited about it. I have my next few videos planned. If you have any video ideas or topics you would like me to tackle, please let me know. I've really been enjoying kind of researching and scripting these out. This was my first more scripted one, but I'm really excited to do these monthly. And yeah, I hope you'll subscribe. If you are new and you stumbled on this video, my name is Jessica, by the way. Hi. I would love to have you join our family here. I do vlogs, I do some makeup-y videos, I do a lot of chatty videos like this too. We'd love to have you join, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.